everyone. Greetings. My name is Alex Rogals, and I am an arts and culture teacher at Hunter College. And I am very pleased to welcome you all to another event, which is part of our Networking Japan series, which introduces people, our students, as well as our guests, to people who are working in jobs which require either Japanese language knowledge or Japanese cultural knowledge. We are very, very lucky today to have two guests with us who are going to be talking specifically about manga, but I think maybe a little more than manga, actually. Alphabetically speaking, first is Alex Benigno. He's a Chicago native and graduated from the University of Illinois at Chicago with a bachelor's in political science. He started working at the Kinokuniya Chicago location in 2017 as the buyer and event coordinator, but since has relocated to the Kinokuniya New York City flagship location as the assistant manager, and he covers Western comics as well as manga, anime, toys, and collectibles. Welcome, Alex. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure being here, and I'm glad to be part of this.
Thank you. And second is Hope Donovan, and Hope is the editorial director at Viz Media. She has been an editor since 2004 for manga publishers like Viz Media, Tokyo Pop, Broccoli Books, Yen Press, and Kodansha. She's also been a freelance letterer, copy editor, and rewriter for manga and video games, as well as the author and artist of a few short manga with Yaoi Press and ALC, and an author of the scholarly essay in Boys Love Manga, Essay on the Sexual Ambiguity of Cross-Cultural Fandom of the Genre. Ooh, I definitely want to hear about that. So welcome, Hope.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
So I was hoping that we would start, I guess we can go in alphabetical order again, if that's all right. If you could tell our audience a little bit about your experience, how you came to Japanese culture and how you came to your job and what that job entails.
So pretty much the generation I grew up with is very late 90s anime. And a part of it also had to do with growing up with Japanese movies as well. I was exposed to a lot of Japanese movies as a kid. One of them being Zatoichi, which is basically a movie about a blind Japanese swordsman. And it's into the stereotypical Japanese swordsman genre. And then as I grew up a little bit more, I started getting exposed to a lot of the what we call classics today, like Dragon Ball Z, Yu Yu Hakusho, a lot of the legacy animes from the 90s and early 2000s. So as a kid, that definitely exposed me to the world of anime and in turn, actually, Japanese culture in general. So I was exposed to it at a very young age, and that's something I wanted to explore a little bit, and I started studying Japanese in high school, actually. I was able to study abroad in Japan in the city of Shimane Okizumo. I studied there for slightly longer than a summer, and that trip exposed me directly with the culture and experience with the language. Unfortunately, since then, I have not been able to go back to Japan and had to develop the Japanese skill on my own. And that's actually part of the reason why I started working part-time originally for Kinokuniya in Chicago. And I didn't want to lose my Japanese as a skill set. So I wanted a job that directly involves the use of the language. And at the same time, that's pretty much where there's not that many Japanese bookstores across the country. And I just happened to find one of them, which was Kinokuniya, which is actually a little bit on a tangent from where I had originally gone to school for, which was political science. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in political science, and I actually worked political campaigns while I was in Illinois. Needless to say, it was a very good experience, and a lot of it was interpersonal. At the same time, I was able to transition those skills and actually use it to be the buyer and event coordinator while I was at the Kinokuniya Chicago location. What I was doing there was pretty much purchasing a lot of the English books for the Kinokuniya stock. Of course, my specialization turns out to be the manga portion of it. So a lot of it is purchasing a lot of like shonen titles, shoujo titles. And if you want to be a little bit more specific, from direct publishers mentioned before was Viz Media, Yen Press, Kodansha, a lot of the big ones. So I was a purchaser for a lot of the English books there, and on top of that was event coordination. A lot of the event coordination was also working with Japanese related communities. Japan Society in Chicago, I believe, worked with them as well. And I know there's plenty of anime related conventions across the United States. So one in Illinois was Anime Central, or ACENT. So a lot of what I did there was event coordination for the booth at the convention. And a lot of that transition to where I came to, where I was transferred actually to the Kinokuniya New York flagship location and became the assistant manager. A lot of my job description is pretty much the same thing, except I just manage staff with a little bit more emphasis on sales. Been doing this since 2017, and I could definitely say it's been a great experience. I am glad, I'm definitely in a privileged position to say I get to work with anime, manga, and Japanese related goods. So I definitely feel like this is a good position to be in.
Thank you very much. I wonder, could you tell us a little bit about your like day-to-day, like how your job works, or like sort of some of the things you're responsible for?
So first and foremost, the field that I'm in is pretty much retail. A lot of it is dealing with customers face-to-face basis, and doing a lot of the cashier work originally. So a lot of it is not too different from someone working like at Target or working at a retail store at the mall or something like that. A lot of it is sort of the same. The only difference I would say is the usage of language, actually. So aside from English book buying, I dipped my toe in the Japanese book buying as well. I am by no means fluent at all. I'm not a native speaker or anything. I studied only for 4 years and didn't take any of the JLPT proficiency tests, Japanese language proficiency tests. I would say I was roughly good enough to pass, to get by, so to speak. But the usage of being able to read the basic lettering, hiragana, katakana, and some entry level kanji is something that you will do at a bookstore like Kinokuniya, where you will be dealing with text in Japanese, whether it's Japanese magazines, Japanese manga specifically, manga originally in Japanese before it's translated to English. Japanese art books as well. So the only difference is you will have to, at some point, put that to use, at least on the sales floor level, being able to restock and identify books in Japanese and being able to return that where it's supposed to be in a retail environment is definitely a skill needed at a bookstore like Kinokuniya. But I will say this, for New York specifically, there's definitely different departments. There's definitely a section of most of Kinokuniya locations that are like a typical bookstore, like a Barnes & Noble or a local bookstore that carries Western or Western novels and even DC, Marvel type books as well. So there's always that type of market that we try to cater to. But of course, we specialize mainly in the Japanese side of things.
I was in Kinokuniya the other day, and it sort of struck me because the just the volume of titles that you carry is so vast, and not just titles, but the merch. How do you decide what to bring in and what to like not bring in?
A lot of it is on very just like anything in pop culture, it's part of finding what's trending and what's been released in popular media, right? If you look at the major streaming companies nowadays, Netflix, Crunchyroll, a lot of those are starting to incorporate anime into their streaming services. So it's a clear direction that anime and Japanese related interests are going in a very positive direction. And that's a very good indicator on, okay, Netflix is streaming One Punch Man. Probably a good idea to invest in or looking to see what type of One Punch Man merchandise are out there. So, and then that's just what's being animated. There's stuff that hasn't been animated yet, and that's just strictly in a written comic format, right? And usually that's a very good indicator of the sales in manga format or book format is a good indicator to what's actually going to be streaming in the future. And I guess in comparison to back then, a lot of the trending titles right now is due to social media. You could easily go on TikTok, you could easily go on Twitter, and it wouldn't be too different to see a trending title on the page of something anime related or Japanese related. So I definitely think Japanese pop culture or anime in this case is definitely becoming part of mainstream.
So when the process of gathering these titles, for example, with manga, whether it be, actually, I'd like to know, both English and Japanese, because I know that both of those things exist. How is it decided which ones are purchased or which ones are brought into the store? I mean, obviously you have talked about sort of the popularity of things, but what's the process of actually acquiring these things and bringing them into the store?
Mm-hmm. Since like most retail environments, a lot of what I focus on is actually the sales aspect. So there definitely will be certain series or licenses or titles that are just not as popular anymore. They had its time in being trendy, and then everyone moves on to the next thing. So it's within my best interest to halt said series, stop purchasing from different distributors and manufacturers for said products, or sorry, for said title, and then try to find the next thing. And a lot of it is really paying attention to what people, at least in a face-to-face level as well. I do talk to a lot of these customers face-to-face, and they share their opinions on, okay, I would really like to see more merchandise being made for this. And then since I am the retailer, I do communicate with a lot of the distributors and manufacturers, and they oftentimes, get asked for opinions, ask for what's been popular or people are asking for, and then as a retailer, we would definitely like to see an expansion of what's the word I'm looking for? Capitalizing on a trending title. So I mean, aside from the books dealing with major of the book distributors, the manufacturers, I would say, have a longer time frame in getting approvals to make said products. And then that's just going into the whole licensing aspect, which is a little bit different, actually a little bit similar in the book industry, as it would take a little bit longer time to get a product made of Satoru Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen versus just getting a book that you could easily just catch up on. So in the world of books, there's also the world of licensing. So a lot of it is trying to time everything as well. We as the interest of being an assistant manager and capitalizing on trending titles.
All right, let's turn to Hope. Hope, can you tell us a little bit about your experience, what sort of your background is and how you came to your position?
I'm also from Northern Illinois, so I'm from Rockford. So my experience actually started in elementary school. So that would have been in the early 90s, and we were actually taught Japanese in 5th and 6th grade. I think there was an idea that Japan was going to still be a manufacturing world leader going forward, so we're going to need to know Japanese. So I learned my hiragana back then, and I also remember in 5th grade we had to color in a map of the Tokyo subway system, which is not something like a 5th grader in Illinois needed to know, but we did it anyway. And then after that, I kind of had back and forth times with Japanese culture and media coming in and out of my life. I next kind of got into anime when Cartoon Network came to my area, probably about year 2000. And I was into Sailor Moon, Gundam Wing, and all that stuff. I took 1 semester of Japanese in college, and finally, much later, so probably 2014-ish, I returned to my studies for maybe another year and a half or 2 years. There was a local language school in the area called Soko Gakuen. It was actually run by like the Buddhist temple, and they provided adult education in Japanese. In a different direction, I went to college. My majors were drawing and English. And somehow I was able to get an internship at Tokyo Pop in the summer of 2004. And that was between my junior and senior year. So I finished up my final year of college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I called up Tokyo Pop and asked if they had a job, and they had a job. It was as a copy editor, and it was a 6-month contract, but I wanted to get out there in the world. So moved across the country, started as a copy editor, and in my 3 years there, things moved pretty rapidly, going from copy editor to junior editor to editor. And then that happened to be when the recession hit. Tokyo Pop basically went under at that point. The publishing program did. So I continued on as a freelancer. I utilized some of my other skills. I became a letterer at that point. So I was lettering manga, using connections I'd made from time working at Tokyo Pop to meet people at other publishers. So I did just all kinds of random stuff, copy editing, doing English adaptations, doing lettering. And then in 2011, an ex-coworker of mine said, hey, Viz is going to have an open position as an editor because they're going to start a boys love imprint. Do you want to do it? I thought, okay, I'm having a great time as a freelancer, but this would be the one thing I would go back for. I didn't get the job, but they offered me a different job as just a editor. So I did that for a few years. And then I was promoted to managing editor. And then a couple of years ago, I was promoted to editorial director. So I have been at every single rung of the editorial ladder, including freelance. Yeah, it means I've been working in manga my whole life, which is pretty strange to believe. So in my current position as editorial director, I have a couple of main responsibilities. I oversee the editorial department. So any sort of questions about process, quality control, HR issues, all that stuff, I'm in charge of that department, which also includes the copy editing department. And joined and separately to that, I have a focus on acquisitions. So in the end, it's usually my call whether or not Viz will acquire a certain manga series or not. So no pressure there. But that's part of what I do. And also to the side of that, I'm in charge of scheduling our releases. So assigning the titles to the editors and choosing when we will release each volume of the series. In addition to actually like reading the books too, for quality control. My knowledge of Japanese language is not super high. I've also never taken JLPT, but I feel like my knowledge of manga is very high. So with basics of hiragana, katakana, and some kanji, and being able to read handwritten text like sound effects and asides, I can struggle through most manga. But really more important than being able to read every manga in detail in Japanese is understanding historically where the manga market has been, understanding where people's tastes are, fans' tastes currently are, And just like Alex said, like being able to read trends and being able to perceive the momentum behind a series. So it's a little bit of content knowledge and it's a little bit of sales knowledge.
Can you talk a little bit more about, because I think when I think of, we were talking about this before this started, that, you know, often a title, there's just volumes and volumes and volumes. And so when you're sort of deciding on what to choose, how much of it do you actually have to get through in order to get an idea, or is it really a thing? Is it really that sort of experience sort of lends itself to understanding?
Yeah, I think experience is really crucial. An example of this is my old boss who used to be in this position before me. We were talking about whether or not to acquire Haikyuu, which is the volleyball shonen sports manga. And I had the books there. So, okay, do you want to read it? And she said, no, I don't need to read it. This is a shonen sports manga. I know exactly what it is. And as time has gone on, I tend to feel that way too. Knowing what the genres are, you can somewhat predict like what the story arc will be, and who the most likely audience for it is going to be.
In terms of that, in terms of audience, is this something? How do you break down audience in terms of like where? Like, is there a sort of like compartmentalization of, oh, this is for this set of, this is going to be for this audience and this audience, or do you sort of just approach all manga as like a totality?
It's a little bit of both. I think it's really important at least to be able to envision someone who would buy the manga, because if you can't envision someone who would buy the manga, that person probably doesn't exist and you probably shouldn't do the series. So we have imprints at Viz. We kind of divide all of manga up into about 5 imprints. So we have Shonen Jump, we have Shoujo Beat, we have Viz Signature, which is for seinen titles, and then we have a Viz Media, which is kind of a catch-all for other stuff. And then separately we have Sublime, which is for boys love. So I usually use those imprints as tools to kind of figure out, does this manga we're looking at, does it seem like it would fit in this imprint? Would it fit alongside other titles here in terms of themes or art styles or anything else? Those tools help a lot because there's a lot of manga out there and there are a lot of things that cross boundaries, but usually things that fit easily into the buckets are easier to sell.
So sort of the things of the past, if they sort of are reminiscent of other things, you can sort of gauge how they'll do.
Yep, that's it.
Have you ever been sort of surprised by, because the other thing with regards to sort of like the sort of volume of a particular manga, like, have you ever been surprised by, like, as the publishing wears on, that something it throws a curveball at you that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I think I have 2 good examples of that recently. One is actually My Hero Academia. So Viz picked up My Hero Academia after it had been, it was about chapter 29. So it was kind of popular in scanlations, but it wasn't like the huge like mega force that it is now. And we started releasing the volumes and it was fine. And then the anime came out and it did something that you almost never see in the manga publishing world, which is you started to see sales increase over time. So, maybe we sold a certain number of volume 3, but we'd sell like more of volume 4. And then you have to reprint volume 3 because obviously the demand is there. So yeah, the anime made a huge change in trajectory for that series. Similarly, actually, Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, we picked that one up before the anime was out. I thought it looked really nice, but I thought, I enjoy it. It's interesting, but I don't know if this is going to catch on or not. But as soon as I saw the first like still from the anime, the beautiful anime adaptation, it was clear that this one was going to do much better than we expected. So yeah, sometimes things surprise you. Hopefully it's in a good way rather than not selling as many as you thought it would.
Alex, you had mentioned before that you had been talking to someone at Viz, and part of the reason why I was very excited to have the two of you together was because inevitably the two of you, whether or not you actually necessarily work directly with each other, there is a connection between the two places, so where you work. So I wondered if maybe you, either or both of you, could talk about sort of how that relationship works and how one feeds into the other.
Oh yeah, as being the retailer and being the person that sells the books on the front lines, I definitely meet a lot of people from different publishers. I think definitely the biggest one is where Hope works at right now is Viz Media. By far has the most popular titles. But then you also have like Yun Press, and then Kodansha being the other two. They're definitely right there with them. And a lot of it is I think I should also mention is also the distributor in between the publisher and the retailer. There's a couple of major ones like Ingram that actually distributes to the retailer and other stores as well. So they're a very good medium for us to actually get those books to the store. So I definitely think they're the good between Kinokuniya in this case and Viz Media, since I buy Viz Media titles directly from the distributor Simon & Schuster. So, but in terms of actually speaking directly to Viz, a lot of it is collaborative and event focused. Considering how big Viz Media is as a manga publishing company, there is a plethora of titles to choose from. So, needless to say, on my end, it's hard, definitely hard to pick and choose what to pursue in terms of making a promotion of that sort. Like recently, we did a promotion at Anime NYC with Kodansha for Attack on Titan. The author happened to stop by at the convention center, and we were able to speak with Kodansha prior and get some exclusive merchandise to be sold at the booth and even at the store right now. So that's in those type of instances is where I would be speaking directly and in detail with directly with the publishers, and that could span for months. A lot of it is just waiting for approvals, waiting for things to be designed and then approved on both parties. What are the limitations? How much can be produced? The logistics of delivering to the store from the manufacturer. There's a lot of things to consider in terms of the collaborative effort between the retailer and the publisher, like Viz Media.
So Viz is a pretty big company. There's probably about 170 people now. So there are other departments who are more specialized in marketing and sales. So I personally get to be very internally focused and don't usually work with anyone outside the company. But like between me and Alex, there's Kevin, the VP of sales of Viz. So I'm talking with Kevin a lot, and he's relaying to me things like, okay, well, the retailers have been saying this, can we do this? Or if we're creating a unique print product for a convention or something, then Viz is the kind of the agent between the US and Japan we're going to go back to the original Japanese licensor and ask, can we do this? So it can be a through line, from Japan eventually to what's at retail.
I'm hearing sort of in this description that the things on the on Japan side can be a little tricky sometimes. What exactly makes it so tricky? Like what are some of the sort of challenges of bringing a title to the United States?
The good thing, I guess, is we are doing everything legally, officially, in a way that the original creators are being compensated. So that means dealing with contracts and dealing with royalties and making sure the infrastructure is set up so that money can move. And then also, Japan is there to approve the products that we make, to ensure that they fit the original vision of the creator. So you can imagine we make a new cover for some volume of a manga, has to go to Japan to be reviewed by either the creator themselves or the editorial department or the licensing and rights department there. So they need some time to look at it, send notes, and send it back. And at least at Viz, for the most part, that relationship goes really smoothly. The companies have seen our track record, and so they generally trust us, and there's not a lot of nitpicking. But anytime, of course, you have to do some sort of new thing that nobody knows about yet, then there has to be explaining. And then there would be cultural differences too, as to, okay, why do you want to make this product? We just, it can take some time to explain that to our associates in Japan, but usually you take enough time and everybody understands, and then the thing moves forward.
I see. All right, I want to open just to our audience. So if you have a question for either Alex or Hope, please I have the ability to see. Please use the Q&A button and just type in your questions, and I will relay them. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I will continue to ask some questions. It's very interesting. It's very complicated. One of the things that when we've talked to translators almost across the board, they've said that, oh, I never talk to the artist. I get paid to translate. So you were talking, Hope, about bringing things back to the representatives and sometimes the author. Is what they're looking at, do they look at translation on behalf of the author, or is it really more about sort of cosmetics and packaging and how it's being presented that they're most concerned about?
It tends to be mostly about visual elements. Obviously, that's a huge part of manga. But the text, like we're going to have on a cover or something, which is one of the main elements we send for approval, that does get checked. The actual interiors of the books, those are not reviewed by Japan, which is great in terms of the fact that they trust us to put out a good product. It also makes the production much, much easier because we don't have to have back and forth. However, Japan will check interiors for things like art books much more often. They can be very particular about color, so they want to check the wet proofs themselves. But that's definitely the minority of cases.
So, for example, like I know Junji Ito had he had the Twisted Visions, where that was pretty much an art book. That would be something which would be much more complicated compared to maybe putting out an omnibus of manga, and where more of that's about the cover. And it's still colors and things.
Yeah, Twisted Visions in particular, I don't think we had to get approvals from Junji Ito on the interiors. He's actually a very easygoing guy. But we did make sure to follow everything as closely as possible. There's some like neon colors, crazy colors and stuff on that cover. So sometimes we will preemptively try to make things better, and we're going to send it to a printer that we think can do this thing really well. Every book we do, we still have to send to the creator themselves. So they're going to see what we did. So if we screwed up, they're going to see and they're not going to be happy. So we always try to keep that in mind.
All right. So we have some questions from the audience. Let me grab them. All right. All right. This question is for Hope. This question is about reprints. They want to know that there are some manga that are now very expensive because they've gone out of print. And is there any instances where sort of how you were sort of talking about how sometimes like something starts off really slow and then becomes really popular? Are there instances where Viz Media will go back to a title that maybe wasn't popular at first and bring it back?
It's a great question. It's reprints have become such a hot topic in the past couple of years due to the supply chain issues and just the explosion of manga in the past couple of years, starting during the pandemic. So every week I'm part of a reprints meeting where we look at our inventory and we decide what we're going to reprint or not reprint. And that used to be an incredibly boring meeting. And we'd be haggling over very small quantities, like hundreds of units here and there. And then it became the most exciting meeting during the recent times because it would just be like a knockdown, drag out fight between production, who was saying the printers cannot print all of this, and sales saying we need these books. We would have things in and they would go, all the back orders would be filled immediately. And then we'd have back orders again the next day. So we had a huge rise in the number of reprints we were doing. So what that meant in this short term was that titles that were not our very top sellers were not able to be reprinted because we were just reprinting Chainsaw Man, Demon Slayer over and over and over again. So some things got pushed to a lower priority, some series volumes went out of stock, and only now are they finally coming back into stock. I would say starting next year, you're going to see everything's back in stock that we are trying to get back in stock. But to the other part of the question, do we kind of return to series that have kind of, they're kind of dead? Rarely we will do that. A great example is Banana Fish. So Banana Fish came out a long time ago, probably mid 2000s, and it did its thing. And then, years and years later, suddenly an anime was made and we realized we had to reprint it, and we did. So now you can actually find Banana Fish in the stores, even though it had gone out of stock everywhere for quite a long time. But usually we will not revisit a series and reprint it unless we see a new piece of momentum that wasn't there before that could drive enough sales to justify doing the reprint.
Interesting. So if I can just follow up on that question that was asked. So like, how do you gauge that interest? Like, I mean, Alex, maybe Alex was talking about sort of listening to people and talking with them. But are there like sort of locations where or people at Viz responsible for figuring out like what the public is clamoring for or what they're asking to come back?
I feel like that it's mostly me. And my associate Evan, who works a lot on acquisitions as well. We do get requests, so people write into Viz and are like, I want this. That can be a way to gauge interest, but usually it's getting advance notification from our anime partners that something is coming, and that's usually the momentum we're looking for.
So the connection between that anime connection is very important.
Yep.
I guess to Alex, would you say that in terms of the way things sell, or like the way things are interested, is the interest in anime directly related to who's asking for what type of manga?
I would definitely say there's a high correlation to that, especially if something gets announced on any of the streaming services that a new season or a brand new anime comes out. Immediately, that's when I look, I speak to people at Viz like, oh, okay, is this going to be in stock by this date? They just announced this on Twitter. They just announced this on a lot of the emailing list that something is going to be coming out. So anime and just media in general is a very good, like what Hope was mentioning, a good push for whether or not to bring something back or to like immediately say like, oh, we need to get on the reprinting efforts on certain volumes.
All right, I have a question for you, Alex. It's about merchandise, and they want to know how exactly you what merchandise you decide to get, and is certain merchandise harder to get sometimes? Like, do you have to like is there any sort of difficult process in acquiring hard to get merchandise?
It is definitely that requires a lot of thought and commitment, because a lot of the, especially when it comes to merchandise like toys and collectibles, a lot of those orders are actually made months in advance before they actually come out. There's usually a quick preview image of what the figure is going to look like. It could change from, the moment I receive it via email and then to when it's actually produced. A lot of it is gauging the trend on how this character or this any character from a specific series will do good and sell well. So a lot of that is sort of a commitment and a risk from a sales perspective. And a lot of the times I can't really cancel or pre-order. So usually I have to have a very strong gut feeling that a certain character from a series is going to sell very well. It could range from multiple factors, whether a character is very cute, whether a character has, recently passed, in the series itself. That usually really determines the high sell value of a product for a certain character. It could be something as just getting a season 2, getting a season 3, or just the newest season. A lot of that is what I take into for production. And in terms of the actual manufacturers, there's so many different manufacturers that produce a lot of these collectibles and high-end figures. So there's definitely a lot to choose from. And like I mentioned, a lot of it can be a risk because I am committing months in ahead to produce it. But a lot of it is also dealing directly with Japanese companies in Japan. A lot of the gachas I brought I like to bring to the store, getting like blind boxes of a character. I think that's part of Japanese culture, a lot of the gachas. So, and I think a lot of the Western audience is starting to enjoy that, and also get a little bit frustrated by not getting the character that they want. That's sort of, I think that's also part of the appeal is, the gachas. So I deal with a lot of merchandise, from apparel to blind boxes to figures, DVDs even. So it's a lot to choose from.
I can't even imagine. There's actually a related question, a follow-up question, which is, how exactly are you learning about this? Like you're talking about, I see this, I see that, and I decide what to, are there like trade publications that you're given, or like do all of the manufacturers sort of send you like books? Like how do you find these things?
A lot of it is from pre-established connections. And a lot of these companies actually sort of know each other and compete with each other. You have Bandai being a pretty big one. Kotobukiya is another Japanese manufacturer. A lot of these companies do know each other and like to compete with each other for certain series. And determining whether or not to choose between this company and that company, I think is a great problem to have, because it really only benefits the purchase or the person buying, right? The customer, because they have a lot more selections. Um, and I guess the hard part in making that decision is um, oversaturation, actually, since they sometimes really focus on, for instance, like a character like Nezuko from Kimetsu or Demon Slayer. Um, a lot of that gets oversaturated, and sometimes I'm left with a lot of product and overstock. So at times like those, right, either discount it or just wait for a sale. Um, but there's so much different merchandise, and as I mentioned, a lot of the decisions to purchase something happens months in advance. A lot of due to the pandemic, a lot of it is based on pre-orders, and they have to adjust the quantities per. We're not the only retailer, of course, so they got to allocate the logistics accordingly.
So when you talk about pre-orders, you mean are these pre-orders that Kinokuniya lets buyers know about, or are these things that buyers themselves know about and are asking you to get?
So they do send out solicitations where like, hey, we think Kinokuniya would do very well with this brand new figure, and that is sent out to a lot of the buyers. In Kinokuniya's case, a lot of the stores are pretty independent in the sense that everyone has their own independent buyer. In some cases, there's actually regional buyers, depending on the West Coast stores, Central, and then some stores on the East Coast. So a lot of it is determined based on the individual buyer, and that's sort of where a person or the New York store sort of comes to play, since we're the flagship store. We're used as a pillar and reference point for the other stores to adjust their numbers for the buying process. If I'm purchasing something for the store, usually other stores follow suit.
Oh, interesting. So it's like one might influence the other.
Precisely.
So stores are paying attention to you. Well, you're paying attention to products. They're paying attention to products, and you're paying attention to each other.
Precisely.
Wow, interesting. Is that similar, Hope, with Viz, like in terms of like title acquisition, or maybe a particular mangaka?
It is. Viz has some strong competitors with Yen Press and Kodansha and Seven Seas. So sometimes we see what the other publishers are acquiring. We see what genres are working for them, and that may lead us to expand what our offerings are to try to go for other similar titles that we wouldn't have thought before. Or if a competitor is offering on a title released from one of our parent companies. Viz is actually a child company of Shueisha and Shogakukan, two large Japanese publishers. So we're generally alerted when a competitor has offered on a title from those publishers. Knowing that someone else in our market is interested in it can be a motivation to look more critically at that title and try to see what the merits are. You also kind of get a sense of what the tastes of the other companies are and what their identities are. So like Yen Press is probably going to pick up this title. A frequent conversation had between me and Evan, the other acquisitions person, is who do you think offered on this? This seems like Seven Seas did this. Oh yeah, this is totally their type of title. So yeah, you do get a sense of the other players in the market.
Is there a title that, or are there titles that you feel like are Viz titles, like, or like there are things that you're, and what is it that you're going to you're going to look for versus what is it that you're like, that you might say, that might be better for another publisher?
It's a great question, because that is also another tool that I can use in deciding whether or not to pick something up. My own personal tastes in manga don't really align that much with what Viz puts out. So I often have to think, more often than not, is this a title that fits Viz's identity, and just pick there rather than being like, I love this title, let's do it. Although sometimes I get to do that too.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And somebody has a question, which I'm glad they're asking, because I wanted to ask about it. You had mentioned, and I had mentioned in your bio, that your interest is boys love manga. They want to know how you got into that, and are there particular titles that you really like that you could recommend?
Yeah. So the the probably not that well kept secret is that I wasn't really interested in manga to begin with. I was really only interested in boys love. But I got an internship at Tokyo Pop, and then I learned what the rest of manga was. So I've maintained that interest ever since. During that, small period of my life where I was a freelancer, that also gave me the time to work on that essay that I mentioned in my bio. And then, fortunately, Viz decided to expand into boys love as well. And I remember thinking at the time, isn't all the good boys love already published? I really had no idea. There's still so much. There's so much more now. There's still new publishers getting into the game in Japan like all the time. And the nature of the titles that are being published in Japan has changed over the time that I've been interested in it. So you used to find certain tropes back in the day, and now you find things that are beyond that. It's much more expansive. I mean, we are still talking about boys love, so there's only like so expansive and inclusive we can get, but it is really fascinating for me to continue to watch it grow, and especially in boys love, more so than in mainline manga, authors are pretty important. So I bet you a lot of people who are fans of some of the big titles, they may not even know who the author is, but a lot of boys love creators get kind of known for their style and the type of tropes that they do. So that's a kind of interesting difference. As for titles, I'll have to shill one of my own titles. So in addition to all these other things, I actually do still edit books. One of the books that I edit is Yorichin Bitch Club, which is a porn comedy, ridiculous parody, super fun. I tend to like most things by that author, Ogaratsu Tanaka. She's also published a series called Escape Journey, which is much more like real world and serious, but very good. I love so much of the boys love that we do. We also have a weird one called Mad K, and it's very like eroguro. It's got like intestine eating and demons and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's nice to be able to feel like you're putting out content that is kind of edgy, kind of out there, which isn't something that Viz does a lot. We're much more focused on the mass market most of the time, but it's good to be able to serve all the different tastes of people who read manga.
This question is for you, Hope, but I think maybe Alex, you might have something to say about this. They're asking about you had an internship at Tokyo Pop and that sort of fell into your lap, but does Viz have internships, and are such things much more difficult to acquire if there are such things? And if there are such things, how does one get one?
Yes, so I was really lucky back in 2004 because Tokyo Pop was basically using intern labor to run the company. I think there were maybe 15 or more interns. The editorial department alone had 5 or something. There are internships at Viz. There's not a lot. Viz over the years has kind of scaled back the number of internships, but there are still internships in editorial and in the design department. So that's for like designing the covers and such, and ads that go in the book. Currently, we have an intern, and the intern is extended until June. So we're not currently hiring, but we're usually trying to hire interns at the beginning or end of school years. So like June or August or like December times. And if someone is talented and working out, we actually try to extend that internship for as long as we can, for maybe to the 6-month mark or 9 months or 12. But at least for Viz, it is pretty competitive. You know, there's just not a lot of opportunities to go through that route at this time.
And what sort of qualities or what sort of skill set do you want an intern to have?
I wish I could give you slightly more specific, but since I don't actually hire the intern, I'm not sure what exactly has been selected for, but we're generally looking for somebody who can come into the office for the 20 hours a week that are, or 24 hours a week that are required. They should have a background in something related to editorial. So English, communications, even journalism, something like that. And we're also looking for like good attitude, since we're not really looking for experience. It's more about, will this person be good to work with, easy to work with? Does it seem like they might get something out of this experience? Will it help them on their career path?
I guess probably, I don't know that Kinokuniya has interns per se, but in terms of, I actually wonder this myself, like I would imagine probably in your department, it's probably, you get quite a few people asking for jobs. Is
I
that,
do, yeah. I
and
would say applications aren't short at all.
and what is it that when you hire somebody, which I believe your department, you're fairly small, yes?
For my department, yeah, I actually had to sort of expand the number of employees I needed because anime and manga just blew up. Where I used to run the floor with really only 3 people. I had to double that because just the sheer amount of people visiting the bookstore is pretty crazy to say the least. And I think I mentioned this earlier. For the first and foremost, it is a retail position. It is not that different than working at a mall or anything like that. But as I mentioned, I think a company like Kinokuniya Bookstore will allow you to, use pretty much what I came here for, is to actually use the skills that you studied for. Even now, I'm still using quite a bit of Japanese. Not fluent as I've mentioned, but it actually unironically turned into Japanglish a lot because a lot of at least my floor, I do require some level of Japanese, whereas like the basement floor is pretty native. You're dealing with a lot of high level text, newspaper level reading. So a lot of that is different requirements per department. But for mine, I think you can get by with some level of Japanese. If for anyone that's taken a JLPT test, I definitely, that already shoots you up in my eyes when I'm looking at these resumes and applications. But of course, this is the store right in the heart of New York, Manhattan. It is a very, very high traffic area. You will be dealing with a lot of customers. So that retail portion is definitely still there.
among your staff, is it safe to say that along with their ability to traverse retail, they also have a wide knowledge of anime and manga? Or do you wind up hiring people sometimes who are just have excellent retail experience and they sort of grow into that?
I used to think that I could get by with someone that's very knowledgeable about um, manga and Japanese culture in general. But well, a lot of what I care about is being able to put the product out to be sold, right? um, but I mean, with New York, we do get a lot of tourists, and being able to, especially from Japan, we want to be able to at least communicate in some way. We do get the tourists, as I mentioned. Phone calls sometimes happen in Japanese. In my case, sometimes I'd be dealing. I would have to stay a little bit longer at the store to take a call that's in Japan, or another, Zoom meeting that requires some language proficiency. And being in Manhattan, a lot of these people from Japan like to visit the store and see how the product is doing. People from Shueisha, Kadokawa, a lot of these Japanese publishers like to visit the store, and being able to converse directly with those people is always a great thing to have.
We're about out of time, but I want to sort of end just because both of you are in the acquisitions, in the land of acquisitions. If there was, if you could maybe talk about something that that either you're working on, Hope, or Alex, something that is coming down the pipeline that you're really excited about, be it a manga, be it an anime, or be it a piece of merchandise for you, Alex, but be it a manga, Hope. Is there something that you're really looking forward to that's coming our way?
So part of being in acquisitions is not being able to tell people what you're working on.
Of course.
Definitely.
But we have announced some things that are coming out. One thing I'm pretty excited about is we're doing a two-part manga called Until I Love Myself: The Journey of a Non-Binary Manga Artist. And it's a pretty interesting memoir about dealing with sexual harassment, and like a long journey to come to terms with how one feels when they're already in a non-binary body, and then experience harassment on top of that, and how you can, this person's journey about how they can feel more in themselves and move forward with life. So I'm looking forward to that.
That sounds really interesting. Right, and when's that coming out?
Oh, let's see. I think that's June 2023.
Oh, okay. Well, a little time, but that sounds really interesting. Alex, anything you're looking forward to?
As Hope was definitely saying, there's definitely some things that as much as I would love to say and mention it, there's just stuff that you can't mention due to confidentiality, right? But I will say this, that we recently just worked with Kodamsha for Anime NYC, and I think we went around the block recently this year when working with major publishers, and I would definitely say working recently, you could expect something between Kinokuniya and Viz going sometime in the next year.
Ooh, mysterious. I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Alex and Hope, for talking with us today. And thank you to everyone who came and listened. We appreciate your participation and your questions. Thank you to the Japan Foundation for making this series possible. And we look forward to seeing everybody again in the next one, which will be in the new year.